Hello and welcome to this live stream discussion today, brought to you by Business Leader and Heat Recruitment. For the latest event, we have partnered with Heat, as just mentioned, to run the rule over IR35. Whilst the government have U-turned on the IR35 repeal, following the unravelling of the Truss and Kwarteng budget and Premiership, it remains a very complex and misunderstood piece of legislation. So knowing the right or wrong way to apply is important, as well as understanding as a contractor where you truly sit in regard to IR35, and the risks of it are also very important too. So we've brought together a panel to kind of go over this and discuss it. We'll start by providing a context to IR35 and the latest developments, and then we'll go into a bit more detail about it. There is a chance for questions from the audience, so if you are watching and you have a question for our panel, please do send it in, and should we have time, we will make sure that we put your questions forward. For those of you engaging with Business Leader for the first time, a little bit about us. We're a print magazine stocked in over 600 WH Smiths, and we also have a requested readership model around over 90,000 kind of business leaders across the UK, as well as stocked in all kind of major serviced offices. So now on to today's debate. We have on the panel Dan Chadwick, who's a director at Heat Recruitment. Morning, Dan.
Morning, everyone.
We have Shazia Imtiaz, who's general counsel at APSCo.
Good morning.
Morning, Shazia. We have Drey Francis, who's the CEO of Compass Contracting. Morning, Drey. Seb Maley, who's the CEO of Qdos Contractor.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Seb. And Stephen Moore, who's the partner and head of employment at Ashford's LLP, who, along with Shazia, will be providing more of the legal perspective. Good morning, Stephen.
Morning, all.
Well, we'll crack straight on with the debate. I'd like to start by providing some context to the discussion and looking at what IR35 is and what is the history of this tax legislation. So, Dan, I don't know if you want to just kick off and give our viewers a bit of an update of where we are.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. I suppose the biggest thing, and most people thought this webinar would be postponed or cancelled or changed, but in all honesty, in the recruitment industry, we found that since it's become a topic again, there's been more interest in both clients and contractors, where previously, the IR35 regulations have been over complex, and they've kind of not wanted to delve too far into it because of the risk. But now is a great time to talk again about those complex regulations and how we can help both as Heat as a business, but through our panel of experts, both our client base and contractors as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Just to stick on that, were you quite surprised by the U-turn?
Oh, it was a massive surprise, but at the same time, with what's going on in the government in the past, well, I'd say 6 months, but going back 2 years, nothing is that much of a surprise. I think everyone was very excited when that legislation was announced, albeit for about 24 hours before people started to realize that we were in that scenario where anything can change. Ultimately, it's led to more interest in the debate, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
No, thanks, Dan. Drey, I saw you nodding then. Obviously, yeah, Dan does make a pertinent point. Who knows what's around the corner at the moment? But were you quite surprised as well?
No, I kind of looked at the announcement, and I questioned it, because if you were following the budget closer to where everyone was, offering IR35 is is worth about 1.3 billion a year to the receiver. And while I have my feelings on IR35, I do think passing up that kind of income to HMRC was something that I never saw them really going through with. I thought it was a bit of a red meat policy for the constituents, or for the parliamentary base, really.
That's interesting, Drey. No, thanks for that. Shazzy, I just want to bring you in now. If you could just give us a brief overview of what APSCo do and your role there, and your kind of thoughts on the last few weeks in the context of IR35.
Sure, thank you, Ollie. So, as you said, I'm Shazzy Imtiaz. I'm General Counsel at APSCo, and I head up legal and compliance. APSCo, as you're probably familiar with, is the Association of Professional Staffing Companies. We represent about 1,000 of our corporate members who operate across the sectors, professional sectors of STEM, legal, finance, as well as education, social work, and healthcare and clinical healthcare. So we, like yourself and the fellow panelists, have been very disheartened by the U-turn on the U-turn of the off-payroll working rules. We have been lobbying since 1999, 2000, when the initial IR.
I think Shazia is unfortunately frozen there. But I think the thread of what she was saying that they've been disappointed by the U-turn of the U-turn obviously builds interesting what kind of Drey said about you kind of anticipated it, because like you say, it's worth 1.3 billion to the receiver, so it's quite a big chunk of money to withdraw. Seb, I mean, do you want to kind of come in here and give your kind of initial thoughts on where we are now?
I was very surprised with the original announcement of the repeal. I don't think anybody predicted that would happen. And then likewise, I think as time went on, we could see how unstable the situation was. And I suppose when it was announced that there would be a U-turn, perhaps people weren't particularly surprised. I think echoing kind of what you mentioned earlier, I think it's a positive that it's clear that people are starting to talk about IR35 again. It was very clear by the way in which the government announced both the repeal but also the U-turn of the repeal that IR35 was kind of very much top of their agenda. And I think the reaction that they had to both announcements will have shown that it is an important issue, and it means it perhaps will be used as a political football again in the future.
No, thanks, Seb. And Shazia, I think we have you back, which is great. Seb was just kind of building on your point, and you mentioned you've been lobbying for some time. Seb mentioned, he sees IR35 quite, it's good that it's back in the spotlight, but could be used kind of as a bit of a political football. You mentioned this kind of long-term lobbying. Do you see it being repealed going forward?
Well, we've had 3 chances in as many months in the last 3 months. And the current Chancellor, the very first thing he did was to mention that there was going to be this U-turn on the repeal. So we're a little bit disheartened by that. We'll just have to watch this space to see what the government has in store in the coming months. But at the moment, based on the first thing that the Chancellor announced upon being appointed was the repeal of the repeal, it doesn't look promising.
No, thanks, Shazia. Stephen, was there anything you wanted to kind of add? We can talk more about some of the legal, perspectives going forward, but just on this initial kind of introduction to IR35 and the latest developments.
No, I think, echoing what everybody else has said, but also I think once the Exchequer gets used to the revenue it can generate from the sort of the tax position on this, it'll be very difficult, I think, in the immediate term with the constraints on government expenditure pulling back. So I suspect, whilst we're keen to see some developments, I suspect it will be some time before that happens. And if there is a change of government in 2 years, then that's even, I guess, more unlikely, perhaps.
No, thanks, Stephen. No, I think that is a likely approach, isn't it? When they start to generate revenue, they're not going to kind of want to turn off the tap with the way things are potentially. But it's good to hear. So we're just going to now look at the kind of impact that U-turn had. Dan, I mean, on the recruitment market, what effect did that have?
Well, initially it was a couple of days of everything sinking in and a bit of nervousness around what to do. Since the repeal and then re-repeal of them, we have seen a massive increase in interest in contract roles. So ultimately, it's got the conversation going again. Contractors were very nervous when the regulations came in about contracting. There was a lot of hurdles to jump through, as were employers as well. And what I found is over the past couple of weeks, we've found more interest in contracts. We've had our clients reaching out to us about guidance on regulations and how to bring in contractors, because at the same time, we've got a global skills shortage going on. So it is really topical with the contract world to bring in contractors into those positions. And at the same time, where things have been left on the shelf for a couple of years in terms of not being able to hire contractors or not wanting to go through these processes, we've now found people's interest back in. And that's really important for us to point them in the right direction, ultimately coming to us, and then directing them onto the experts within our panel that can help in terms of setting up their contracting business for both candidates and clients.
Thanks, Dan. And Drey, just want to kind of get your perspective on that now, the impact that it's had on you and what your business does.
I mean, just to echo Dan's comments there quickly, I think it is about getting experts in. So, while the repeal didn't go ahead, people need to remember that IR35 we can still impact IR35 judgments. You've got a lot of businesses here that are experts in what they do, ourselves included. An end client could, have its own form of repeal by sort of looking at IR35 in its business appropriately. I don't think there's this sort of take in the market that IR35 is really good for umbrella companies or payroll businesses. That's not the case. Trying to fit contractors into umbrella companies that don't belong there is unhealthy for the entire industry. It's bad business for the economy. I think businesses want to work towards getting contractors, because as Dan says, there's a skills shortage here. Applying IR35 appropriately to their business rather than just blanket banning everyone is good for business. It's good for our industry. It's good for recruitment. It's good for the experts that are on this panel as well.
And thanks, Drey. Seb, is there anything you wanted to kind of add to what Drey and Dan have said?
Well, I completely agree with what both the guys said. Then I think certainly from our point of view, and obviously we provide kind of IR35 support and services to both contractors, but also engagers and agencies as well. Since the U-turn was announced, similar to what Dan was saying, we've seen a lot of interaction. Obviously, both from contractors predominantly have been quite disappointed with the way that things have turned out naturally with the U-turn, but I think we've certainly seen a lot of positive interactions from engagers, from end clients who seem, I think they were quite excited themselves that there was going to be a repeal, that they could once again open the doors to contractors, because we've got to remember that the legislation has been a thorn in the side both to contractors but also to engagers and agencies as well, but it very much has brought the legislation back up to the top of the agenda. So we've had a lot of contact from firms who were looking to revisit what they did. Perhaps they used CEST or another, or kind of or a more sort of hard-lined approach in terms of banning PSCs originally, but there does seem to be a lot more willingness and openness to look at alternative ways in which they can handle compliance.
Thanks, Seb. And Shazia, just building on what Seb said there, is that what you're seeing amongst your kind of members? That willingness to kind of relook at this and maybe look at some of the positives as well.
No, absolutely. We've had the same sentiment really. When in September the repeal was announced, there was a very short-lived period of celebration because when the off-payroll rules came into effect in the private sector in 2021, a lot of end clients, as has been said by the fellow panelists, seem to make these blanket determinations not to work with PSCs. So we very much looked forward to the repeal because it would open up the availability of professional, highly skilled workers working through PSCs again.
Oh, thanks, Shazia. Just want to move on now. You mentioned obviously the payroll element there, Drey. I mean, have you seen an increase in levels in October?
No, I wouldn't say that's the case. And maybe that sounds bad on us as a business. I think, you know, October, November are good times for the payroll industry in terms of, you know, sales numbers. I wouldn't say there's been a spike. I think, you know, what Shazia and Seb have said there is accurate. Businesses are starting to realize that if they take a grown-up approach to this, if they sit and they work with a panel of experts and they invest the time to actually get their structure right, then they can engage PSCs, and PSCs are brilliant for their economy. So I don't think it's, you know, it's sort of a Black Friday sale for umbrella companies at the moment. I think very much the opposite. I think people are actually doing things the right way, and that's positive. It shows the industry is taking action itself.
All right, good stuff, Drey. Thanks. Just going to move on. We actually had a question, one or two questions in from the audience, but we'll just ask this one, then we'll start to look at those. But this is, I guess, is open to the panel, but maybe start with Dan. I mean, where does the panel suggest companies or contractors kind of come to on advice for IR35? And does the responsibility remain with both the contractors and the agency? I know we've kind of touched on that a little bit, but Dan, if you want to kind of start on that one.
Yeah, in terms of where to go, naturally, as a recruiter and a recruitment business, we are the place to come to for advice. And if we don't know, we have this great panel of experts that we can refer them onto, and not just people but businesses as well. I think it's natural with an engagement in terms of employment to engage with both the employer and the possibility of going in there, but ultimately the recruiters in responsibility for both part of this legislation, and also has a duty of care to a contractor anyway to make sure that they are going into the right contract for the right reasons. I think Drey, you've probably got some more thoughts on whether to play it safe. I'm sure you do.
The source of truth in the industry is actually the recruitment business. They don't gain commercially or any other way if someone's inside or outside IR35, and they are the link between the client, the candidate, and everyone else on this panel. So starting at the recruiter, having that conversation up and down, that's where the most impact can come from. And I don't believe in, you know, playing it safe. I think if you want to attract the best talent, you don't do what everyone else is doing. You play the cards that are dealt to your business. And working with your recruitment partners is the best place to start on that.
Right, thanks, Drey and Dan. Seb, anything you wanted to add to that? For advice for our viewers.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, echoing what the guys have said there, it is, you know, fundamental really with the IR35 rules that everyone does work together. Everyone in the chain works together. You know, it shouldn't just be a case of the onus being on one party. You know, there should be a clear link up between all parties in the chain. I think talking about kind of who to look to for advice, I guess, you know, when you're actually looking for technical advice, it's quite important to look at somebody who's actually got sort of practical application with the legislation. Obviously, I-35 is not a new thing. It's been around since 2000. Employment status issues have been around a lot longer than that. So I think it is important to make sure that whoever you're looking to for advice has got experience not only of the theory of I-35, but also how it's kind of practically applied, you know, in terms of defending investigations and so on. So I think that's quite important.
Well, thanks. I was just going to ask Stephen a question, but he's disappeared. So we might hopefully get him back in a bit. Shazia, yeah, you know, in terms of your members, where do you say to them that they should go to advice for?
Yeah. So absolutely echoing what's been said already. I think the supply chain wants to operate compliantly, and in most cases they do. So clients are members, contractors, that is fundamentally their aim. And essentially we provide a lot of resources for our members. We on IR35, plus we have a legal help desk. HMRC also have a very good manual called the HMRC Employment status manual. So there are resources available, plus many assessment tools as well to assist with the IR35 determination. So various resources are available, and we're happy to put people in touch with that.
No, thank you. I think what we'll do now, because we're about halfway through, we'll take our first question from the public. It's been put, which is, should companies just make their contracts outside IR35 to play it safe? Drey, I mean, maybe you want to start with that because you said not to play it safe. So, if you want to lead on that one.
Yeah, like I don't think, if you look at no two businesses are the same. So if you had a big bank, the decisions they would make versus a construction company are very different. The types of contractors that work into those businesses are very different. I think playing it safe is what's led to disgruntlement with contractors. And let's not forget, this entire industry, all these businesses here on this call exist because contractors turn up to do what they do every single day. We've all sort of proliferated out of that. So I think we owe it to contractors to not play it safe, but to judge each situation. And look, it's going to be hard. It's hard for a business to sit there with 2,000 contractors and judge each person. So we're not talking about that, but getting the panel in and looking at what's right and what fits your business. I don't think that's playing it safe. I think that's playing it smart.
No, thanks, Drey. Dan, do you want to kind of take that on now?
Absolutely. I think it was really tempting when this legislation came in, and it happened for multiple businesses who have then performed their own U-turns on blanket bans, which is great to see the level of detail and realization that losing out on talent is critical to everything within a business, right down to turnover and profit. So at the end of the day, yes, people are tempted to play it safe, and companies do, but more and more companies are starting to perform their own U-turns and come out the other end of looking at each individual, and therefore is the best talent in the right area within that business, rather than looking at it as a problem. It's a solution, and contracting is a solution, and a great solution that's been around for as long as we have and more, and it isn't going away. It's a case of, in this current skill shortage, can contractors not only plug the gaps that there is from permanent staff, but also perform a better temporary and project-led role?
Thanks, Dan. And Seb, is there anything you wanted to add to that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about the impact that the announcement of the U-turn and the original repeal had, but I think it has been a kind of gradually companies have been revisiting. I think that competitive landscape has really caused people to stop and look at the way that they do things. So I think hopefully that will continue. Hopefully all of the buzz around IR35 is going to speed that process up. But it's certainly something that we've seen over the last few months.
Thanks, Seb. And Shazia, would you like to add to that question?
Sure. So strictly making a blanket decision that something is inside or outside IR35 is contrary to IR35 legislation. But I think what some clients have done is ban, for example, the use of PSCs in their supply chain. And the adverse element to that is that you actually end up reducing the pool of talent available to you, because some professional skilled workers will prefer to work through a PSC. So essentially, by making such a determination that you're not going to work with PSCs in your supply chain, narrows down the pool of talent available to you. And with any contract you put in place, HMRC will not look just what's written on paper. They will look to the reality of the situation as to whether it is inside or outside IR35.
Thanks, Shazia. Really interesting. And please do keep sending your questions in at questions@businessleader.co.uk. We've had another one. I want to get these questions answered because people are making the effort to put them in. So hope the panel doesn't mind. We're going to throw another one up. This has come, what does it take UK has put that one forward again. Is the public sector just blanketing all their roles inside IR35? I mean, Yeah, you ended with Shazia. So Shazia, do you want to pick that one up?
Sure. I think what's happening with some end clients is they're risk averse. They don't want to run the risk of having the HMRC knocking at their door and the whole issue of investigations. So often they will choose to work with, agency PAYE workers or umbrella workers, effectively inside IR35.
Well, thanks. Did anyone else want to add to that question before we moved on?
I think obviously the public sector, the rules have been established for a lot longer than they were in the private sector, and what we have seen in the public sector is a lot more activity from HMRC in terms of policing the rules. So there were quite a lot of public sector organisations who were hit with what appeared to be fines for getting determinations wrong, which could have prompted a little bit more risk aversion, I guess, amongst the public sector. I think, public sector is going to act similarly to the private sector in many respects in terms of revisiting, re-engaging and looking at things again. So hopefully that's something that will continue. And I think the public sector would have been as thrilled as anyone was to hear the announcement that IR35 would have been repealed, because I think, obviously historically massive users of contractors. No,
thanks, Seb. Dan, Drey, did you want to add anything to that question before we moved on? No worries if not.
No, you guys covered it.
Good stuff. One question that we had a lot before, which is what we've kind of built into discussion as well, is what is the optimum way for a private sector firm to kind of manage IR35 compliance whilst remaining obviously attractive clients to work for? I mean, Dan, did you want to kind of take that one on?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to get experts in, and as we mentioned before, we can head up the management of that panel of experts and introduce the right people. The best scenario for us to work with as a recruiter, for example, if people are thinking of realigning their contract resource, is for us to come in and look at what's there and give our expertise, and also introduce our panel where needed. So we've got great knowledge, multi-years of knowledge in the public sector and in the private sector of these regulations, and we can advise. And I think one of the panel mentioned before, there is no benefit or bigger benefit for a recruitment business being in or out of IR35. It is more consultancy led, and that's what we're seeing the market and recruitment change to a much more consultancy led model. The days of people needing one or two contractors are limited. The projects that we're seeing at the moment are multi-projects with multiple contractors, and that leads to more complex conversations, and that's what we're finding at the moment.
Thanks, Dan. That's an interesting trend that you've highlighted there. And Drey, so yeah, your advice to a private sector firm on how they can manage compliance and still be a good place to work at.
I think it's about trusting the people around you. So, like Dan said, if you've got a good recruitment business if you're running with a managed vendor or something, it's going to them to understand what's out there. And I think sometimes people can sort of just be a bit lazy in their approach. So we've seen recently some of the bigger global, like the PEO companies or the employer of records, are moving into the UK space as well. So it's not just a case of shoveling all your contractors into an umbrella company, as bad as that might sound for business. There are other models out there that are fair to contractors. If contractors don't get the choice of being a PSC, well, then you're saying, should the private sector firm own that responsibility? And should they look to engage with a big PEO and cover the costs of that employment model, rather than everything being lumped down onto the contractor? So I don't think we're in a space where one shoe fits all, or one size fits all. I think it's very much a case of look around the market, understand what is at your disposal, and make the decision for you that's right. And ultimately, when contractors see that you have applied some effort to your thought process and the way you've gone about it, people will vote with their feet. People will go to businesses that have actually put some effort into doing things the right way. And those that are lazy and have a single-minded approach, they will be left with less talent on their books.
No, thanks, Drey. It's an interesting point, and Seb, obviously, in that war for talent, Drey's point is that the ones that put the effort in at the front end are going to be the more attractive employers, and I guess that's something that you agree with.
Definitely. I think the private sector organisation shouldn't knee-jerk either to a risk-averse approach, i.e. banning PSCs or kind of blanket determinations, but similarly they shouldn't be looking for shortcuts at the other end either, in terms of rushing through outside determinations or looking for kind of alternative engagement models. I think the real success stories from the private sector were those firms who put in a bit more effort up front, and a lot of that was really about internal education and looking at the manner in which they engage contractors, making sure that those within the organizations saw contractors for what they were, i.e. kind of valuable external flexible resources, and I think that's they will benefit from that for years to come. So I think there's a lot of relatively straightforward work an organisation can do upfront to stand them in good stead.
No, thanks, Seb, and Shazia, I guess that's something that you certainly advocate for your members as well.
No, absolutely, I agree with what's been said. I think end clients and recruitment businesses need to work together collaboratively, and the clients will definitely benefit from the support, because I think some of the main issues with risk-averse clients is perhaps a little bit of lack of knowledge or expertise with IR35, and to get that support from the recruitment businesses, I think would be really welcomed, and also for clients to have good processes and procedures in place to be compliant. Would also assist and make use of the resources and expertise available.
Well, thanks, Shazia. I just want to get a little bit more into the mechanics now for our viewers. And you mentioned kind of resources there, Shazia. What's the panel's views on whether organisations should use HMRC's, I guess that's CEST or CEST tool? I don't know if Dan, you want to kind of start with that one.
It's certainly the tool that is the most accurate. There's many tools out there. I think the thing to be cautious of, and what people are cautious of, is there are many tools out there that are designed to point you in a different direction or into a business. And like anything at the moment, there's multi calculators out there. There is multi systems out there to calculate these things, and HMRC's tool is relevant, it's accurate, but it shouldn't be the only thing to look at.
Dan, so what would your advice be, Drey? I mean, it's relevant and accurate, but is it the right tool? And like Dan said, is it best just to obviously keep your options open?
Yeah, I would say you need to see where the money flows on these things. So ultimately, HMRC's tool is going to possibly fall on its side more than other tools might do, depending on where the commercial outcome lies. I also think there's sometimes we can just use a bit of common sense on this. Not every contractor is outside IR35. Equally, not every contractor is inside IR35. Employers or end clients do know where they're sort of pushing the envelope on some of the stuff. If someone looks and feels like an employee, they probably are, and therefore you should make the determination appropriately. You use whichever tool sits best for you. But there is also this common sense approach that people need to be taking. We speak to a lot of contractors every day, and I'm astounded sometimes to speak to contractors who were genuinely in business on their own accounts, and they should never be on the phone to an umbrella company ever. And in a lot of cases, we've actually sat down and mediated with the clients and said, look, this person shouldn't be running through an umbrella company. They really should be running their own company. And here's all the reasons why. And sometimes just that conversation, that little bit of knowledge, I think we forget that the clients aren't experts at this. They don't know some of the legislation that sits below them, Criminal Finance Acts and transfer of debt liabilities, and they have no idea. So they just panic. I think sometimes just having a good conversation with someone and setting expectations is a really good place, and not just only tools.
Thanks, Drey, and welcome back, Stephen. We're just discussing, HMRC's CEST tool, and Seb, just picking up on Drey's point, which was a good one. Obviously, the tool is important, but it's also having the knowledge and of what you can and can't do. But yeah, just picking up on that thread. Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think the CEST tool is only as accurate as the information that's being input into it in the first place, and I think what you'd find is that a contractor could use it, and a client could use it for the same assignment and get a completely different answer. I think that's one of the issues I think that we've seen in the public sector. A lot of those public sector organisations used CEST and then were picked up by HMRC further down the line for incorrect determinations. And I think the problem is that CEST is a tool which uses algorithms and automated logic, and you're essentially having to answer a binary yes/no type question to a very nuanced point, which is based on archaic case law from 1968. So it's not. Yes, it is a tool. Yes, it is out there. Yes, it is naturally going to be a default choice for a lot of organisations. But I think that if you do use CEST, you need more sitting behind that to substantiate anything any determinations that you give as a result of using it. So it's much maligned, and there's a lot of people who have kind of questioned a lot of elements of it that I could talk about it for a long time, and it's probably best not to go down that road.
No, thanks, Seb. But yeah, some good advice there from Seb, Dan, and Drey, and Shazia. Much maligned CEST tool. So your thoughts? Shazia, you are just, if you could unmute yourself, sorry.
Someone had to do it, Ollie. So yes, the CEST tool, there's no obligation to use the CEST tool, and has been mentioned by the others that there are others out there. With the CEST tool, HMRC have said that where the information is input correctly and is accurate, they will stand behind the determination that is output from it. But there are other tools that are equally good, or in some cases, from what Zeb and Drey are saying, better perhaps, which are backed by insurance as well, which back up the determination should there be an issue with it. So there are various options available and not just one. Thanks,
Shazia. Another question that was quite common pre-event was, do statement of work contracts get around IR35? And I think we kind of touched on the notion of trying to get around it and playing safe. But Dan, if you want to kind of start with that one.
Well, SOWs are not a way around regulation at all. They are designed for specific projected statement of works, which is completely different to the purpose of a contractor. They are placed on projects that often are in multi-year length and serve a great purpose, but certainly not an alternative or a get around for IR35. And anyone thinking of doing that will often get tripped up by HMRC later down the line.
Thanks, Dan. Drey, you don't want to get tripped up by HMRC, do you?
No, I think a lot of times we'll speak to agencies and people will say, "Is there a way around it?" And I think that's where you have to stop people straight away and just say, of course, anyone can imitate something and make it look a certain way, but let's not forget that there is a mountain of evidence that gets sent to HMRC. Every RTI, every intermediaries report. HMRC are quite clever in the sense that they do sit back and have all this information sent to them. So it doesn't matter if you're trying to throw an SOW on top of a contract to make them seem like a PSC. When that information gets to HMRC, they will make their own determinations. And as we've seen in the past, they are judge, jury, and executioner. So they will find you guilty, and the onus is on you to then prove your innocence. So I would never advise trying to get around anything.
No, thanks, Drey. The long arm of the HMRC will always catch up with you, won't it? So, Seb, anything you want to add to that thread about statement of work contracts?
Yeah, I think that the issue that we've seen with statement of work contracts is it's all around something called contracted out services, which is where obviously traditionally you've got a contractor, then a recruiter, and then a client. Whereas if the entity providing services is a consultancy, and that is done on a statement of work type arrangement, and that consultancy happens to have contractors who are working for them, then the consultancy becomes the client for the purposes of IR35. So if that's all done correctly and properly, and the risk is sitting in the right place and so on, then that's fine. But what we have seen is some potentially some engagers looking to alter the manner in which they receive services from one which is a traditional kind of time and materials recruitment agency basis to what is dressed up as a consultancy providing a service to them. It is an area that HMRC are definitely looking at. In the opening kind of letters that we've seen, when it comes to their policing of the rules, they are specifically asking about contracted out services and statement of work type arrangements. So it is something that it's not a quick or easy workaround. It is something that people need to be very aware of.
Okay, thanks, Seb. Shazia, any further thoughts on statement of work contracts? You're muted again, Shazia. Sorry.
The statement of work and sort of outsourced services as in consultancies, they work if that is the reality of the situation. But HMRC will look beyond just the contractual documentation to see that what is actually happening behind the scenes. So in some ways, yes, if applied appropriately, it will be outside IR35. But if it's actually just dressed up as a statement of work or dressed up as a outsourced service, then it's not going to be a silver bullet for IR35.
Thanks, Shazia. We are drawing to a close. Last chance to send in any questions if you have them. And we just want to kind of now sort of look into the crystal ball a little bit. Are there likely to be any further changes to the IR35 rules in the near future? I mean, Shazia, if we start with yourself and go around the other way this time.
Well, we're always hopeful, and APSCo will definitely be continuing to lobby with the current government, and we remain hopeful. But definitely, if we'll have to watch this space a little bit with the present government, because the current Chancellor has made his views quite clear in his initial mini budget.
Okay. Seb?
Yeah, in the short term, I doubt it. I mean, I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, that the government will have noticed the reaction that their announcements had, and that was one of the reasons why I-35 was pretty much the first thing that was mentioned by the Chancellor when the U-turn was announced. So I think they know that it is an issue which is emotive, and which I guess for any party could potentially win votes. So it's certainly one to keep an eye on. I think people will continue to lobby. So fingers crossed. There will be changes at some point, but it's not going to be in the very near future, I don't think.
No, thanks, Seb. Seems to be getting an agreement there, Drey, that possible changes, but not likely in the near future. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. But I like I said at the top of the program, I think it's less about relying on whether it will change or it won't change. It's more about taking ownership yourself as a business. You can control IR35 and deliver it in the correct manner to your contractors. So we don't know which decision is going to be made at what time by this government or future governments, because they're all so good at U-turns and flip-flopping. I think it's more about owning it and saying, right, we're going to apply it correctly. And if you do that, I think that goes a long way towards getting that attraction to contractors.
Thanks, Drey. So Dan, could we have a U-turn on the U-turn on the U-turn?
I very much doubt it. I think who knows in the next couple of years what might happen, but in the short term, I don't think so. I think, albeit I might eat my hat tomorrow and someone gets sacked and things change again, or I'm a celebrity changes everything with Mr. Hancock in the jungle. But ultimately, I mean, we're in what is supposedly a financial downturn in the country. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen that in either public or private sector, we're the busiest we ever have been as an industry in the contract world, and that won't change. It's yes, we are in a product of a pandemic and a misguided war, but we're not in the traditional downturn that leads to job cuts and less money. It isn't the case at all. And I think for people thinking about the best talent at the moment, we need a balanced approach again to regulation, where we can help provide inside or outside of IR35 contractors, and for the best projects. It doesn't work for every project in the industry, but we're busy, and I think every one of the panel is finding that at the moment, and that won't change.
Thanks, Dan. It's good to hear some positivity as well, and good to hear that you're seeing lots of activity, both sort of client and business side as well. And I'm sure Matt Hancock will be raising IR35 in the jungle, so we can expect imminent changes. I just want to say thank you to our panel and to everybody that tuned in to watch today. We're now just going to go to a final word. We'll start with you, Seb. Obviously, we've discussed a lot, but both contractor and business side, what would your kind of final thought be?
I guess now's probably the time to forget about all of the back and forth with the repeal, the U-turns, and so on, and just focus on the future. I think our sort of overriding message to private sector firms, public sector firms, but also contractors is that the rules are manageable, and with a bit of effort, you can you can continue engaging contractors compliantly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Seb, and thanks for your insight today. Shazia, really appreciate your time today. Your kind of final thought. Sorry, Shazia, you are on mute.
I will eventually get this right, Ollie. It's been a pleasure to be here. I very much echo what's been said. It's a very buoyant market right now. Our members are very busy, candidate short market. Our members are operating compliantly within IR35 and supporting end clients. And I think, as has been said already, it's been in place now for a while, since 2017 in the public sector and 2021 in the private. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
That's good to hear, Shazia. Thank you for your insight today too. Drey, good to meet you and good to hear from you. Your final thought to all the contractors and businesses that are watching you now.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, mate. Look, I would just implore businesses to act with rationale. Not to look at what's the easiest option. I think the contracting workforce has always been the workforce that drives change in the economy and boosts it. We've got a really great contracting force sitting there waiting to be utilized appropriately. And playing smart as opposed to playing safe, that's what's going to kickstart things. So if you're a business out there and you're listening, don't just do the easy thing. Get your experts in, have a chat, and do things that are correct and do things the right way.
Thanks, Drey. Smart, not safe. That's good advice. And Dan, just want to say thank you to you and the Heat team for today. Some really good insights. And your kind of final message to the contractors and businesses.
I think my ultimate message is to reach out. We're here to help. We're here to consult, and we're here to lead the way in our expertise. This is the first webinar that we've hosted of many, so stay tuned for more from us. We'll keep this conversation going, and all the panel are here to help. But as a recruitment business, we are inclined to help anyone that reaches out. So please do approach us, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan. And I want to say thanks again to all of our viewers and for the people that sent in questions. This will go on our website now in perpetuity. So if you didn't manage to catch it all, please go to www.businessleader.co.uk and you'll also find out about our other events there. Thank you.